Start it up. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Great Cities Institute. My name is Jack Rocha. I'm a community development planner here. We have our guests today. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves, but NHP Foundation. Forgot to mention, this is the Real-Time Chicago Lecture Series. This is number 4 for this semester and the last one. So welcome, everyone. If you didn't get a chance to sign in on the way out, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. All right. Well, welcome everybody. I am Veronica Gonzalez. I'm the Regional Director of Development for the Midwest. I do not fundraise. I want to make that clear. I am an affordable housing developer. So the development to me means putting the money together to make the buildings deliver in various communities. It's probably the simplest way to explain, what I do on a day-to-day basis, but I am in fact a real estate developer. I like to think of myself as a fangless one with no horns, but you can ask the communities I work in, whether or not that's their opinion of me. So I will pass it to my colleagues for introductions, and then we'll start on the organization.
Great. I'm Eva Thibaudeau. I am with NHP Foundation and our subsidiary, which is called Operation Pathways. I straddle Operation Pathways and NHP Foundation. And what that means is that I have a little bit in the development side and then a whole lot in the asset management and the operation side. Specifically where my colleague, who's going to introduce herself in a second, come in, really is around the supportive services and the supports that people need to remain in affordable housing and to be successful, to stay stabilized, and to sometimes move on and sometimes have their stable lives with us on their properties.
Hi, I'm Carmen Correa. I am a resident service coordinator at Operation Pathways, and family center coach. And so I have 2 buildings, but we meet together and we talk about family center coaching all the time and best practices when it comes to providing services and making partnerships with our residents to succeed and meet goals.
And we have 2 folks who are with us remotely. Rebecca Katrina, do you want to introduce yourself, and then Rebecca?
Yeah, I can go first. My name is Katrina Glasgow. I am the South Central Regional Supervisor, so I supervise all of the coordinators across. I do Chicago, Texas, so all of the on-site services. I supervise all of the coordinators on site.
Thanks, Katrina. My name is Rebecca Ely. I am the fundraiser. I am the Director of Resource Development for Operation Pathways, so I oversee our fundraising and communications. Thank you for having us today.
Oh, the second.
I learned the 2 keyboard. I didn't learn the 1.
And then it should work now. Oh, if you click on the keyboard now, it should work.
I got it.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, quick background on the NHP Foundation. We're a 30-year-old organization that started off really as a financer of affordable housing, and we reinvented ourselves many times over as many organizations sort of evolve, into the space. We're now at 65 properties. We're up to 60 employees. We own and manage, give or take, around 10,000 units. We're in 16 states. And most importantly, we house around 25,000 residents. So our offices are in New York and Washington, D.C. Our headquarters are in New York City. A big bulk of our office is in Washington, D.C. And then up until a month ago, you were looking at the Chicago office, but we doubled in size because I had a coworker that moved here from D.C. And then we have offices in Baltimore, but not to overshadow our presence in Texas, where folks like Eva work out of her home in her living room, and then out of our properties themselves. And so I think the takeaway I'd like to leave you with is the NHP Foundation is, although we are a real estate developer and affordable housing developer, the part that makes us a foundation is precisely the work that we do through our sister organization, Operation Pathways, because we own the properties, and then at the end of every year, we take the cash from the properties Nobody gets a bonus from that. Instead, what we do is that we say, how much do you guys need? What's your programming gonna look like in the next year? And we take a chunk of that, some gets reinvested into the properties, but a large chunk of that also goes to fund our services. So when you think of us as a foundation, we're sort of, we do this so that we can improve the lives of our residents through our, our own financial platform. So a little bit about Operation Pathways.
Yeah, Rebecca, did you want to
Oh.
talk about Operation Pathways?
Yes, absolutely. Can you go to the next slide?
Oh. There.
Thank you. Operation Pathways, as we said, is the resident services subsidiary of the NHP Foundation. With over 25 years of experience, we strive to transform affordable housing communities through innovative programs that engage, empower, and support residents to achieve futures they desire. You'll hear more about this, but we really follow NHPF's lead on putting our residents front and central and front and center in the work that we do. We are now in 11 states in the District of Columbia, serving in 35 properties, with serving over 100. We serve close to 6,000 residents every year, and have served more than 150,000 people since our founding. We strive for operational excellence, which means we are core certified. So we are certified in resident services. It documents that we have really strong practices. We support our employees, and we are resident centered. We have a platinum transparency, whatever it's called, qualification through Candide, and 3 stars through Charity Navigator. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Our programming is categorized into 4 focus areas: the pathway to academic achievement, financial stability, healthier living, and aging in place. Each pathway offers residents the opportunities to build skills and overcome obstacles that low-income families often encounter. Through these pathways, we have some set programs that we offer, including programming around credit building and around healthier living. But then, depending on the property, we will decide based on the needs of the residents how deeply we want to go into these pathways and add additional programming as needed.
And I just wanted to kind of bring the 2 things together. You may be familiar with affordable housing developers. You may be familiar with social service folks. What we really do is bring those 2 things together, because we understand that housing is permanent, affordable, safe, and stable housing is the first step in family stability and increasing self-sufficiency. But really wrapping those services around and bringing community partners on site and into people's lives are what really make a difference to helping folks take that extra step from just being in a house to truly being at home and moving their lives forward. So next, we want to tell you a little bit, since we're in Chicago, about what specifically we've got going on in Chicago.
So a little bit about our approach, right? I did mention that we're, 10,000 units, 16 states, right? So it's very easy to look at the NHP Foundation and be like, oh, they're there. Somewhere else there's this remote organization that, that operates, right? And wants to do affordable housing in my community. Well, I am from your community. I'm born and raised in Little Village. I've been doing affordable housing and community development for 25 years. I've worked for city government, the housing authority, private developers, nonprofit developers, accounting firms, you name it. I've had a lot of jobs, but all in building a toolkit so that I could figure out what is the right way to approach community development, both through on-the-ground partnerships, through engagement, either through social service agencies or through organizing groups, and then also figuring out strategic ways that we could deploy capital, into markets. So that's very important to us, is that we have folks that are from communities that we are in, right? Like our folks in Texas are from Texas. We're not hiring folks to move to Texas. They're already from there. They know the landscape. They know the people. That's for us the most critical part, because it helps us build not just the programming, but also the commitment, right, to rebuilding communities. So in Chicago, when NHPF first came to the market, you guys might recall there was the SRO preservation ordinance. We were losing a lot of single room occupancies in the city. And I think at the time, the city hadn't really blended that with, you know, going more towards a permanent supportive housing model. They were getting there. They had to preserve the assets first and then sort of figure out how the, you know, the support services could align later. And we jumped in full force, right? We went in, we picked up a property that was for sale, the Mark Twain, right at the corner of Clark and Division. 148 units. It was almost 160 units before that. And it was an old building, very antiquated, functionally obsolete, you name it, it had issues. And so what we tried to do there was to say, okay, let's not jump into the, you know, deep end of the pool first and sort of start in the shallow water and find ways that we can sort of tiptoe our way over into the deep end of permanent supportive housing. And so we took this property, we knew how to do the financing, right? We raised the capital, historic tax credits, low-income housing tax credits, name a tax credit, we got it. For the Mark Twain, along with a tremendous amount of support from the city of Chicago, much credit to their commitment to SRO preservation as well. And so we repurposed the property, but we didn't lead, as I said, we didn't start at the deep end. We didn't lead with Operation Pathways. We knew we were going to get there. We always knew we needed Carmen in the mix, right? But we didn't start with there. So, we have some corrections to make at Mark Twain. Carmen, do you have an office yet?
I do not.
She does not have an office at Mark Twain. She sits in the lobby space where the residents come down, you know, in the building, which has many advantages. But when you need a private conversation with Carmen, it's very difficult to have. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Having the food service
At the Mark Twain.
Yeah,
Mark Twain.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we knew that we wanted to move to a permanent supportive housing model. We knew we could have the physical space to eventually get there. And I think we're building you an office out in the next year. For the services that we need, along with bringing her case management support, you know, and all of that. But all of that came in sort of after, right? The big thing for NHPF was like, let's get the property, let's figure out the landscape. We know we can improve our programming and our delivery once we're there. So that was our first one. Many ways to improve it, right? That was our first SRO, I should say. Our first development into overall affordable housing was in Garfield Park at the Harvest Homes, which is at the corner of Central Park and Jackson, essentially. And so Pastor Edie, who is the head of the People's Church of the Harvest, which is on the west side, had a 36-unit townhome development that he wanted to bring for affordable housing. And long story short, he had a developer. The developer couldn't take the project to completion, which can happen. And so because we were in the mix for the Mark Twain and at the table, you know, with all the city folks said, do you want to take a look at Harvest Homes? Are you interested? That seems more like, you know, your cup of tea and you guys have the expertise to do it. So we're like, sure, let's go. So we went and we built it. And there, again, because it was a preset set of drawings, the building itself was already kind of not just designed, but it was like, we closed that thing in like 6 weeks, which is unheard of. Most of these deals take like 3 years to close. We didn't have room to change the design, to, you know, put in even property management offices. So Carmen doesn't have a resident services office, but at least we have property management offices at Mark Twain. We don't even have that at Harvest Homes 1, right? Again, looking to get on the ground, figuring out what we could do, how we could improve it. So circle back now, right? Those are all areas that we're going to improve on. So COVID is a case study that, you know, we'll talk about in a little bit about how we've learned from the Mark Twain, and Carmen will talk a little bit because she works both COVID and the Mark Twain. And then we have a second phase of Harvest Homes that we're developing now. This is the project Mary Lou was asking about earlier. If you guys overheard that, we're in zoning right now. We've been introduced to City Council, and our goal is to get to June Plan Commission. But what we've done different in both of these scenarios is that we started with Operation Pathways. So now Eva is telling me not just the space that she needs in the building and how we need to design, you know, a very particular way in order for us to serve not just the new residents at Harvest Homes 2, but also the residents at Harvest Homes 1, which are less than a block away. we led COVID with input from Carmen of like, you need an office. People need to have confidential conversations with their resident services folks and with case management. And so COVID now has that built in. And as I said, retroactively, at the Mark Twain, we're going back, acknowledging that we didn't, do that right. And we're going to build an office for Operation Pathways. So just wanted to give you kind of an approach. We recognize we may not have done it all right exactly, but I think we always had the intent and the approach to get there. So
I think the
go
other
for it.
piece to be aware of is that, what's been happening nationally, and it also trickles down and you see it locally, is that oftentimes the funding streams for the development and the funding streams for the supportive services
Oh, yeah.
don't match up.
Yeah.
Like they may both come from housing and urban development, but they clearly have never spoken between each
Yeah.
other. And so, as we seek,
Yeah.
yeah, like we wish we're gonna have like a happy hour for them all, right? At the end of the day, what we want is to be able to support people to thrive where they are. What we know is that making your housing dependent on participation is not good. I don't want to live anywhere that tells me what I have to do or when I have to show up. If I'm tired, I want to stay at home, right? So we respect that. But what we do is we really take every opportunity to scaffold services and opportunities around people in order to strengthen their own and add to their own resources.
Right.
And so this is not specific to somewhere like NHP Foundation. One of the things that I appreciate about NHP Foundation is that even in existing buildings, they're looking for ways to go back and add these services. What we all know is that, I don't know if anyone heard Veronica speaking earlier, but talking about building to scale.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to fund a 40-unit building. It doesn't pencil at the end of the day. You're not making enough, right, to keep it going. However, when you put in really high need populations who might have a lot of vulnerabilities because of what life is thrown at them, you need the services there if you're going to scale up a building. And so what we really are doing at NHP Foundation and at Operation Pathways is saying that these two pieces, the housing and the service supports, need to go hand in hand. If you're doing the housing without those supports, you're really doing a disservice to the people who live there.
Yeah. All right, I will.
You're toggling.
I'm toggling. Thank you.
So good.
Thank you. Okay, all right, so let's talk about COVID. So I mentioned this is the one where we're like, okay, we got to get this one right, So this is a development in Lincoln Park. It was an SRO property that had operated that way as far back as 1917, originally
If
built.
I can say, SRO is an old term for single room occupancy.
Yeah.
If you think back to like the old YMCA's, it was like, young man. There's
Yeah.
The idea was that someone got a room and you typically shared a bathroom or common area. The newer ones that we're talking about, people have their own private bathrooms.
Yes.
So I just wanted to put that out
Yes,
there.
yes. And then
All the SROs that you're doing now, they have their own thing. So just everything that you guys are doing,
They have their own bathroom.
with the ones that we've done, I don't know that all
Not everyone
SROs
does.
are being redone that way.
Some are changing.
Yeah. Yeah, so it really depends on the model and the program that the operator, decides they can run at that SRO. Some SROs that I've seen are actually keeping the communal pieces, like some of the creative stuff that Casa Norte is doing for home, youth homelessness. So there's a lot of different models out there. We're not saying this is better. We're just saying this is what works for this particular adult population.
And sometimes just with the existing structure you have no other choice.
Yeah.
I think though, when you get into the design and when you're retrofitting and doing your best, I do think we know enough now to know that there are considerations like trying to do like a gender specific bathroom can be really tough nowadays. And as an operator, you set yourself up for all sorts of headaches. It's easier to do private stalls that anyone can just go into and lock,
Yeah.
when I talk to our property management and our
Yeah.
services, people it's like, how much do you want to police bathrooms?
Right.
Would you rather do that or would you rather keep the HVAC going? You know?
Yeah.
So sometimes you have what you have. But the single room occupancy, I would say, is probably also these days somewhat interchangeable with what we call a micro efficiency.
So they don't furnish?
They do.
Yes, ours do.
Many
Yeah.
do, not
Yeah.
all.
Nuh-uh.
Not all. And that is something to ask. And what we're gonna talk about a little bit in the Covent case study here is a very specific type of housing, and this is for an extremely vulnerable population. This type of housing is called PSH, or Permanent Supported Housing. It is specifically for people who are exiting long-term homelessness.
Yeah.
So, it's defined by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. There are certain definitions that you have to fit into in order to qualify.
So income limits.
Income is
Income
one.
limits is just one.
That's just
piece.
one. Yeah.
For the homeless piece, if you're in PSH, you also have to have a documented disabling condition. And you have to have a year or more living on the streets, typically.
Yeah.
That's a simplified definition,
Yeah.
but it gets very, very specific.
Mhm.
Is there an
Um,
age requirement?
18
Old
and
enough to
over?
sign a lease.
Yeah. Oh, you
If
have
you
to
can
be able
sign
to
a lease
leave.
at 17, if you're emancipated at 16,
Well, that's true.
that's
Right.
fine.
Yeah.
They come from the care coordinating system, so when you're homeless, you go down to 10 South Kennedy.
Yeah.
Then, they're able to, get pulled off that list.
Yeah.
And so that I would say is our highest level of support type of housing, and also our most restrictive eligibility wise. Because all of those, for affordable housing, you have income restrictions.
Yeah.
For this permanent supportive housing, you have a lot of other layers from the homeless response system that are layered on.
And I think that's a great way to put it, there's a lot of layers to this, right? And so when we approach this, this wasn't about us, oh, let's go get another deal, right? This is like, okay, how do we make it easiest for the end user, right? So I'll work with my friend Mary Lou here. Mary Lou, let's say she's been, living on the street for 18 months, right? How do we make it easiest for her to sign up at one place, have them do her assessment, right? And then help her get both the services that she needs and the rental assistance that she needs, so that Mary Lou is talking to one person that's navigating her through the entire system, right? Think about it from a user experience. That does not happen. That is not the Mary Lou experience typically, right? And I think what we were trying to do was to say, well, how do we at best break down as many barriers as we can, given that it is a discombobulated system, right? So we said, who do we have to partner with? So I called up, a friend, and we were trying to do permanent supportive housing. You guys might know her, Sol Flores, and I went to undergrad with her, and I'm like, Sol, how do I do this? Like, you've been doing youth homelessness for a while. How do I get this right? And she said, look, I focus on youth. You need to call Michael Banghart at Renaissance Social Services. He focuses on adults. He knows how to do this. He taught me what I know. I've taught him a little bit about what I know. We're colleagues, get him on your team. Okay, so I called him up. So Michael is on our team. And he starts breaking down, okay, in order to do this, you got to go to the housing authority for vouchers. Okay, well, I used to work at the housing authority. I can go there. I know who to call. So you call the housing authority and they're like, well, V, hold on. We want to give you vouchers, but you need to go back through Corporation for Supportive Housing, and you got to get a letter of alignment that you're following a housing first model. I'm like, okay, I can do that. I know how to do that. I can read. So I go back to Corporation for Supportive Housing. I read their housing first stuff, and I'm like, Michael, this is complicated. I mean, I get it, but also it's not my area. Like, how can you help? And he's like, I got you. Let's work on an MOU. Let's sit with your property management team. Let's figure out how we define the roles of what is your property management team in order for them to run the facility. They got to collect rent, they got to pay the bills. But somebody has to make sure that they're holding and navigating the Mary Lou's, of the world and pulling them through the entire system, because that's how folks get lost. And we can do that as Renaissance Social Services. And I was like, bet, what do you need? I need to go get funding through the COC. Okay, what do you need from me to get that, to successfully be funded for this? And he said, I need you to match my funding application. I have the hardest time. I can get the funding, But that 20% match that the COC obligates me to have walking in the door, it's almost like why people can't buy a home, because you have to have the down payment to get the house. You might be able to manage the mortgage payment, but if you don't have the savings to get the down payment for the home, you can't get the home. Same went for the COC funding, and I said, well, okay, 20% of what? I might be able to scramble that together, right? Like, to give me a number, I can work with numbers. And he's like, give me 10 grand. I can figure it out. I said, 10 grand?
That's fine.
Hold my beer. Like, easy, right? Like, I can get 10 grand. That's not hard. So I went back to Ken, who's our executive director at Operation Pathways. I explained, what the partnership could look like. And he said, that is so affordable. Do you know what we pay for services in our partnerships in Houston? And so you have a partner that can fundraise on their own and all they're asking for is 10 grand for this huge lift? Yes, 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 yes. And it was heads nodding all the way down until the end because of good people, skilled people who knew how to navigate through, all of those systems in order for us to arrive at the partnership that we needed for the COVID. Now, I'll pause there and I'll pass it because even though I make it sound simple, it really is a big lift because I think, Eva, as you were talking about, I think we've gotten better at coordinating our funding between social services and housing, but we're not quite there yet, right? So like now we have Cindy Soto, who is our chief homelessness officer, right? And Cindy was at DOH, so she understands the funding rounds. That's fantastic. We also have a homelessness officer at the state level, right? IDHS, Fund Support Services, which is not common in other states that we operate in.
Right.
So we're not as dependent as a lot of other providers are on the federal allocation through the HUD COC because we do have state funding for these programs. However, because of the climate that we're undergoing right now, where things are just getting slashed and burned everywhere, more pressure is going to IDHS in order for them to provide these services, right? So I think that our climate has shifted a little bit,
Well,
to
and
have the support is a
yeah.
good thing.
I do think that, places like Chicago and Illinois in particular, because you do make local investments in affordable housing and in the services that go with them for vulnerable populations.
Yeah.
You're a step ahead of a lot of states that I work in, perhaps the one I live in, which may have been named earlier. Where
Gotta be better than Texas, sorry.
Oh, she said Texas.
It's a low
Yes,
bar,
Texas.
Andrew.
It's a low
Houston's
bar.
a good city, that's a good city.
Houston's a good city, but
Austin's a better one.
it's very expensive. It's very expensive. Can't live there. Not affordable. But it really is when you're doing this type of work and you're looking at how do we do those services, it varies by city, it varies by municipality. There are places where, there's a taxpayer base that goes into the housing and services. And then there are a lot of places where it doesn't.
Yeah.
So, as we see things, as we're looking at what's happening at the federal government and with those resources, that's where I think it's going to get even more interesting state by state and jurisdiction by jurisdiction around, who's able to keep doing exciting things like the COVID that moves, people out of homelessness off the streets and into permanent housing.
Right.
So
No, we're just showing the folks that
Okay,
at the
great.
COVID. So we'll distribute this. I think this is a good case study, for you all as a takeaway. I prefer to tell the story than to walk through, the actual case study itself, mostly because I think it's what you will take away, after this conversation. But we're happy to answer any follow-up questions on any piece of it, how it's operating, what we're doing on the ground, Carmen's day-to-day. And then also, the financing, right, which is critical and important for us to continue. But
And I think maybe, I'm not sure, Katrina, if you're up for it, if you
Yeah.
want to just talk a bit about family-centered coaching and, we can pop over to Carmen for what it looks like on the ground.
Okay, so all of our sites, can you hear me well?
yes.
Okay. all of our sites, we really focus on family-centered coaching, and it's a model that was developed by Kellogg Foundation. And so it goes off of a set of strategies and tools and resources that help human service organizations reinvent how we engage with our residents and the families on site. So that's anybody on site. It could be the kids, the families. We work together with them and kind of meet them on their level and work with them in this family-centered coaching approach. It's really a partnership between the family and the resident services. We really, we want to make progress with their goals, and this is like a partnership where we can work together to achieve goals that the residents set. It's a strength-based approach, and it utilizes motivational interviewing questions, and it reflects listening, supports residents, and identifies their own vision, their values, and their goals. And so really, we strive to work together with the residents in a partnership where they can be heard and we can listen to their voice and, be able to service them appropriately.
And just to put a fine point on it, so I'm a social worker. I come from the social service side. I've been learning the development and financing side in the last 5-6 years. What we used to do in social services is walk in and say, hi, I have certain goals and outcomes. I need you to increase your income. I'd like you to join a community support center. And if you could get a doctor and get some mental health help, that would be great, because then I can meet my outcomes. What we've learned is that people don't operate like that. I don't operate like that. I like to make my own decisions about my life. And I have a lot of opinions about what's important to me. And so this idea of motivational interviewing and what we do in family-centered coaching is that we know that we are not the experts on our residents' lives. They are the experts. And so we come to them with curiosity about what they see and what they want in their future. And we help them figure out how to meet their goals. And so that's the real difference between a more traditional case management model and what we do in this family-centered coaching. And that's, you heard Carmen say that she is, a coach, and that's what she does every day. Did you want to add something and then talk about kind of the work that you do?
Sure, exactly. When we walk in the door, we have to, get in this mindset. We're not the experts, right? The resident is the expert. And we were actually talking the other day where it's like, when was the last time anybody asked you, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? And so when you're looking at a regular type of case management type of situation, that's where people go. Like, what is it that you want? Do you want housing? Do you want food? Do you want this? Well, the questions we're asking is, what do you want to achieve? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And so it's a conversation. We're asking questions. We're listening to their answers, and we're going right there with them. They're in the driver's seat. We're in the back, providing as much support as possible. Of course, housing is very important, getting that food, those emergency situations, you're gonna work with someone to get those resolved. But then what, right? It's bigger than that. We all have goals, so do our residents. We all want more, so do our residents. So being able to be receptive and asking, what do you need from me? What do you want to do in 3 months, 6 months, a year? And then just providing, with our permission, can I give you a resource? Providing the support that they need and that they want, not that we feel they should have. So,
and if I can put on there, just kind of when we take it to the next level too, when Veronica was talking about what our partners at Renaissance do. So when we're working in the housing that is PSH, that housing that's specific to people exiting long-term homelessness, that type of housing, we're not telling people that they have to follow our rules or do what we want them to do in order to keep their housing.
Right.
Everybody who comes in to one of our properties, they sign a legal lease, a tenant agreement, just like anybody else in this room who rents. They sign that same lease with their property management. And if they don't like their supportive services worker and never speak to them, that does not jeopardize their housing. So there are no expectations of sobriety. There are no expectations of participation. There are no expectations of you have to manage your mental health. Every conversation starts with maintaining your lease. So if you were cutting up overnight and knocking on doors, trying to get some money to, go down and, I don't know, get a dime bag or something, right? You're disrupting your community. You're going around, it's 2 a.m, you're knocking on doors, you're gonna get a lease violation. Well, Carmen isn't gonna come and say, oh, you really need to stop using. I think you need to go to a treatment program. That's not the conversation. The conversation is, hey, something is jeopardizing your housing. I see you got a lease violation. What's going on? Like, I don't know. Some people complain. What was happening? I was just knocking on doors. Maybe what we come out of that with is that you don't knock on doors where you live. You go across the street to someone else's place and start cold knocking on doors, right? It's all about maintaining your housing. It's not about how we think you should participate in services.
I like that. I like the fact that you changed it around instead of saying, this is what you have to do in order to stay into this program. This is what you have to do in order to maintain your housing.
Yeah.
So you just did the same thing, but just flipped it around. And
Yeah, exactly, Really.
I have a question about the scale you were talking about earlier and the services that are needed, Carmen, from anybody's perspective, but are there too many units in a building when you have such a high concentration of population that has to have a
That's
disability?
a great question.
In
Yeah,
order to qualify for that?
Yeah.
Well, can I answer
Yeah.
legally
yeah,
first?
yeah, absolutely.
And then someone will get a more fun answer than that.
We all play lawyers on TV, guys. you know.
Well, no, I mean, legally, we do have the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? And so there have been lawsuits against segregating people
Mhm.
based on disability in certain types of housing.
Yeah,
And so, the idea, we used to have buildings, and we do still have some that are on 100% this type of housing. Sometimes that's the only way you can get it done because of community pushback and things like that. Ideally, though, you would have, a market and an income and a household mix. I think that
yeah,
in general, we can all agree on that.
yeah.
You may know, I don't know that there's from a service perspective, there is no perfect number.
Yeah, I think this is a strong opinion where
Yeah.
people don't have a uniform answer, you know what I
Right.
mean? I've heard, you wanna get a certain ratio of case management to resident, but.
And
you
that's
don't
nice, but
mandate.
that's a service
That's a service,
provider
yeah.
driver, that's not a
Exactly,
person
yeah.
need.
Especially if we're not mandating that they come for services. So even though I have 30 units at COVID, that doesn't mean that Carmen is serving 30 people, there. It's completely voluntary. So it's a hard number to kind of strike, with those opinions. We're sort of trying to navigate, right? Through the nuances of like what fits, what works, and what can we fund. So that has led us to many answers. It's led us to 30 units at the Coven and led us to 148 units in a different blend at the Mark Twain, because the Mark Twain is not all permanent supportive housing. Coven is all permanent supportive housing. Mark
And we have a
Twain is-
95 unit
Oh,
permanent
yeah.
supportive housing, that's 100% permanent supportive housing in Houston.
Right,
We also have another 149 that's a mix.
yeah,
Of kind of across the board. My biggest push always is to make sure that you have adequate staffing.
yeah,
That's
what
if
you can
if
fund.
you build it too big and you don't have enough staffing, it
Yeah.
will not be good for anyone. And it definitely won't be good for the people who live there
yeah.
or who work on site.
And so just to clarify, my comment about building at scale is for affordable. It wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily for permanent supportive housing and to best serve this, this population. I think even if if I had my druthers and I could build 300 units at a time of affordable housing, here in the city of Chicago, I don't know that without their help,
Yeah.
that we would have the funding ability to support that many. And I think Lawson House is probably the closest example of something that's at that scale. And you can talk to Jackie Holston all day about what it takes for them to operate Lawson House and what it took for them to recapitalize Lawson House. I mean, it is a beast. That is the biggest, I think, that there is in our, in our market and in our industry.
So how many units do you think that is?
200 plus, 250, I think I want to say, but it was an old YMCA that they
Yeah.
recapped. So, and they broke it up. They have service providers on different floors. It's not one model. Renaissance is in that,
Yeah.
in there, along with many others, Thresholds. you know, you name all the good service providers in the city and they've probably got a couple of floors on there just because that's the way our funding, you know, works. It's discombobulated.
And the other piece is that, I want to say, first of all, is that and actually, the more specialized and high service intensity the population gets, the more stability the population has. There's less turnover. And so, you know, number one, you have property management and services, maintenance, ownership, everyone working really, really, really hard to never evict. And so, you know, where a lot of properties may screen people out, we're not only screening people in, we're doing everything we can to try to keep them housed.
Yeah.
You know, so it oftentimes means when you look across like Veronica had referred to a COC, it's a continuum of care. It's whoever manages your homeless stuff in your area. Typically, when you look at this PSH type of housing, you'll have a 94% retention rate of, you know, year over year over year. People tend to leave oftentimes because they die or move into like skilled nursing or hospitalization. Once you get people in there, it can be very, very, very stable, which is fantastic for property managers. But you know, you don't stabilize the community once.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's ongoing everyday effort, all hands on deck.
Go ahead.
One question, this regarding program, you mentioned the Kellogg Foundation,
Yep.
right? I was wondering if that guides the way you develop the programs.
It does.
Is there something that you can share maybe with me, like with some insights that we can apply we have a certified housing agency.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, what you said is great, the way to approach their needs and wants. Nobody likes to be told what to do.
Mhm.
Maybe that's why a lot of people end up
Yeah,
rather leaving the streets.
Yep.
And then,
that's exactly right.
yeah, and the other thing is, you know, loneliness, right? The way to do it is a
Completely.
companion.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that's what you guys trying to
Yes.
offer.
So I want to make sure that Carmen gets to share this because it gets into that, you know, we used to think that like building communities, social supports, those are like the soft, fun things.
Mhm.
But what we know is that, you know, mental illness is exacerbated when, you know, people don't have touch points, when
Yeah.
they're not in connection with other people. Loneliness, isolation, withdrawal, increased substance use, all of that goes up when we don't have that community.
Mhm.
Particularly, my experience has been deeply in the disconnected people, you know, living in homelessness. And, you know, you take someone who may have some sort of community, maybe it's the person who drives by to work every day and says hi and gives them, you know, a bottle of water. That's still a touch point.
Yeah.
You move them in, close the door, give them a lock, and they don't have that anymore.
Mhm.
So it's a really important piece of what we do is to bring people out of their unit and into community.
Right.
You'll oftentimes find, and that is one of the things that is said about these, you know, these smaller units, is that we may have smaller units, but we tend to have more and larger common space areas. So that people do come out to socialize and have that interconnectedness.
And food.
And
Always food.
Always
Food.
food. For everything.
Why?
Yeah.
And TV.
And TV.
That's right.
Bingo,
Yes,
music,
very
volunteering.
Actually, like, when I first started, that was the first thing I was thinking, because a lot of people were coming back, you know, once they rehabbed it, you know, a lot of people came back. And my thing was like community. We have to, you know, they are single room occupancy, so there are small studios. How are we gonna make a community, right? How are we gonna be good neighbors? How are we gonna connect? And so we had this huge room, and the first thing was like, we're gonna get that TV, we're gonna put out tables for food, you know, we're gonna get some computers, and slowly but surely, right? You know, you have to start somewhere. Started like that, and then we're like, okay, what do the residents want? Because you can throw a big old party, but if nobody likes it, nobody's coming. So you have to get your community's input on what kind of activities they want, what kind of partners they want coming out to the site. And so when you do it one-on-one, but you also do stuff like that, which is, I brought my own. I took it off my wall, so it doesn't look pretty.
No, it doesn't
Oh,
get
It's
to.
beautiful.
This is what it takes. It doesn't
know.
take more than that, right? Go Carmen.
Yeah, so residents, we have our pathways and then what people want to do in their community. Everything from bingo or cooking, someone said it's costume party for Halloween, that kind of stuff. And it started small, it builds, they are able to add more stuff. I look at it and I say, oh, okay,
Look at what the neighbors they wanna be. They wanna learn CPR.
DPR.
Like, they wanna learn how to help each other. You know what I mean? Like, when you let them speak, they tell you exactly what they want.
Yeah.
It works better.
And it goes beyond this in that, yes, a lot of these are fun, and then we have, basic computer skills, we have, budgeting and things like that. And my job is, okay, where can I get my partners that are gonna give me these
Yep.
services, preferably for free, but, we have a little, I have a little that I can give them. And so, yeah, someone can come out and talk about financial literacy, they can talk about budgeting. And then if the resident is interested, they can go one-on-one with these for free. And get more individualized, get more specialized, something that's more important to them and to their families. So this is the fun part. This is a lot of fun.
And then we had a question back here and one here. I
Sorry.
just want to make sure we grab one mic.
Community outreach and trying to get as many people who need these resources involved and aware of what resources you guys provide.
Well, we don't have an office.
Yeah.
Veronica said, I'm right in the middle of the community room, or I will be in the lobby. Sometimes we invite folks over and just send out a newsletter, put up a flyer. A lot of our events, a lot of our activities are stuff they're saying they want, right? And so, if I don't see someone and say, hey, remember how you said you wanted this activity? We're having yoga, come on down, that kind of stuff. So for me, it's a very small building for me, right? It's 148.
True, yeah.
And everybody goes straight through my space. So it's about, reaching out the best. We also have, text blast.
Yeah.
So it's like, pop-up food pantry happening now, where, come and do flower arranging happening now, and people come if they choose to. And that's fine. That's
I do
okay.
think that is something that anyone who does design of these types of projects, or, is looking at where you gonna have services. When I've been able to be part of like new construction on this or rehab,
She's teaching me well on harvest homes too. Trust me, I'm taking all her notes, like.
I'm like, you have your entrance,
Yeah.
if you have elevators, that's where you put your property management, that's where you put your supportive services.
Yeah.
Near the door, so
Line of
that
sight.
you have to pass the people
Yeah.
who want to engage you every time you come in and out of the building.
Yeah.
And,
Yes, do you, are these folks, encouraged sometimes to go to events, or they're like, outside events, like are there flyers, or, sometimes like at assisted places or living places or nursing
Mhm.
homes, people, like they're caretakers somewhat, people who go out, take these folks to events, like,
Yep.
especially, even if they're like disabled, or
Yeah.
you
yeah.
encourage that?
sometimes we have field trips,
Yeah.
I know in
I believe it.
Houston, everyone will head over to the train and go to the museums on the free museum day.
Yeah.
Or, we'll go shopping and we'll have like a nutrition thing and then do a cooking class, or let's all go do this, or absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're always looking for different ways to do that. I think, one time, cause we have a senior building as well, on the south side, and they got this big bus, everybody wanted to go. So we had this big bus, and then my site is a little smaller. I said, I'm paying for Uber for everybody. Uber, it was just so much easier, it's like, okay, 4 people fit in here, let's go.
Yeah.
So, and we're so close to the lake, so it is just a really fun area. So that people could come out and interact and,
Yeah. I love my resident services coordinators. We did one of the properties that we listed, but I didn't talk about is a senior building on the south side in Woodlawn that we bought with tenants already there, seniors already there. And so we had to do the renovation with tenants in place, which is very difficult. But probably some of the best communities that we built was that our RSC took the seniors to the movies. So like, you guys want to go see Black Panther? Let's go. We got a bus, we got tickets. Like, and so when we need them to be out of their unit the entire day, or, because we gotta cut the water or whatever, the electricity is gonna be, intermittent or whatever. Those are things, we take opportunities like that. We lean into our resident services to say, hey, we need you to help with the residents because we're having all these difficulties on the development side. And we want to address them. And so that's where the partnership also, sort of picks up when we have tenants in place and we have to deal.
Very matter, we took them to lunch too.
Oh, yeah, they love it.
Lunch,
Yes.
and
Oh,
then
they
it was
love
the
it.
movies, and then we brought them back home.
All day. Yeah.
What is the success rate?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, because that's our next slide. Okay, vamos. Yep, let's go. So let's talk about impact.
Rebecca?
Sorry about that. Yes, thank you. So across, this is an example of impact that we've had across the property, across all our properties. But we do find, like we said, financial stability. More than 1,000 residents have been supported in housing counseling, and that really means housing stability. So help supporting them in whether they're facing issues with paying rent or managing their utilities or hoarding or anything along those lines. We're able to support them in getting back on track. We do work with other organizations to provide rental assistance for residents. So we partner with them to identify where the gaps are and then find external organizations, some government dollars, some nonprofit dollars to support any back rent that they are struggling with. And then, as we mentioned, we do support them in increasing their credit scores. So across the properties, NHPF has partnered with Isuzu, which is an organization that allows individuals who are renting to build credit by reporting on-time rent payments. So I think we've had tremendous success in increasing the amount of residents who are credit visible and the amount of residents that are increasing their credit. So really excited about that. Healthier living is an extremely popular pathway for residents. As Eva mentioned, or the residents want to take on CPR. We've had several properties that have done that. We also know that they're very vested in increasing the amount of fruits and vegetables that we're bringing on site. I know in Chicago specifically, we have local farmers market that's coming to the properties. And then we focus on increasing physical activity, whether that's through yoga classes or through walking groups. Sometimes the residents will just walk inside the property on the stairs, challenge each other to that. We have a lot of activities that we try to engage residents on, plus some of our properties do have fitness centers. And then finally, we work with youth and we support them with education programs, after school programs, depending on, again, the needs, the ages of the residents, the population that's there. We have an internship program that we offer every summer, and that is extremely successful. The interns are actually paid, so they have an opportunity to learn a lot of financial education during that program. They're learning about budgeting. They all open bank accounts. And they have said, too, that they feel prepared as they leave the internship, better prepared to achieve their educational, professional, and personal goals. So those are some of the impacts that we've seen through the work that we do.
And then our final piece here, I just want to be mindful of the time, is a word from one of our residents who Carmen works with on the regular.
So this one is embedded. I gotta figure out who sent you the PowerPoint maybe? So I think we have to, or we can watch it on
If
the
not.
laptop. Sorry, we could watch it on the laptop.
Yeah.
This is the live
Yeah.
PowerPoint, but I have to turn it around. Sorry,
Yeah.
guys, to be low tech here. Don't be mad at me. But this is one of our residents at the Mark Twain. So some logistics, the PowerPoint was 107 megabytes, so we couldn't quite email.
They're ready to increase it.
Wow. Come closer.
Is it possible for me to share my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Ah.
Give me 1 second.
Don't Rebecca, good to see you.
Yay.
You all have.
Stop sharing.
Yes.
Yeah, you can share your screen.
And make sure that I also share the sound.
Okay,
Let
perfect.
me just share sound.
Okay.
Okay, share.
All right.
All right,
Yes,
this is great.
You guys see it?
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second. I gotta make sure this is up. Slideshow, from current slide.
Operation Pathway has made a great impact on my life during my time here at Mark Twain. Particularly their financial literacy program. That was a time when I never ever wanted to do any credit cards, never. But after the young lady explained to me and broke it down to me the advantages of having a credit score, a nice score, and I thought about it and I tried it, and sure enough, like you said, as long as you pay back on time before the date, it's nice. And I did that, and my score has went up. Operation Path.
Oops, did I get kicked out? Stop.
Well,
Okay.
I think that's okay.
Yeah, great. Thanks for.
Yeah,
Sorry
and
about
I just, I think a takeaway is that, when you choose to pair services with housing,
Yeah.
it's a win-win for everyone. There are extra things you have to pay attention to, like communicating. From our property managers do more than what they might do, as far as communication with supportive services. Our supportive services knows more about property management.
Yeah.
And they work really, really closely together with their residents and, with oftentimes like a resident advisory group, in order to really make these communities thrive and be places where people can like become who they want to be. And if they want to move on, we help them do that too.
What's your demand for these services, housing services?
Housing or?
Wait
Yeah,
lists,
I mean-
wait lists, wait
I mean,
lists,
what
wait
is-
lists.
Or wait lists,
Yeah.
they're endless. I mean, you open ask any affordable housing developer and they'll
Yeah.
tell you they open a 50-unit development, you get 4,000 applications.
Have you
I
considered
mean,
now
it's a
any
lot.
of these public schools that are being sold out?
Sure, yeah, it's a very tough way to
Yeah.
repurpose buildings. People are doing it. It's just very difficult from the financial side, because there's certain things that you can or cannot do with CPS buildings. In a financial structure, the way that our deals are financed, and that makes it more expensive. Yeah. when
But
you
eventually,
have
probably
those.
those properties are gonna get over, they're gonna be taken over by developers.
Yeah, this CPS has just released, I think, the remaining buildings from when they did the 50-unit shutdown or 50 school shutdown like years back. So they've just released those. So some of those have already been repurposed. I've talked to my colleagues. It took a long time even to get them to the point now where they could deliver on the units. That said, there are some fantastic models out there. There's a great one in Humboldt Park that got repurposed that's targeting teachers. There's another one that was originally intended to be like a dorm for Malcolm X College. That's getting repurposed. So it's not that they don't have good outcomes. It's that it's not necessarily the easier path.
It's not the least expensive path.
Either.
Or the
Yes.
least, or the least varied.
Yeah, exactly.
I think if we had one, ask for all of you going forward, and I think you're probably in this camp already.
Yeah.
But, when you hear about potential affordable housing or, redeveloping something into affordable housing, raise your hand and say yes. Tell your neighbors yes.
Show
Tell your
up.
community yes.
Show up.
There are a lot of people saying no, and the people who say no don't understand that these communities do not decrease the value of your home. They increase the value of our communities for
That's right.
everyone.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, when you're trying to get the signatures, everybody in the community want to be in that meeting.
That's right.
And
Yep.
you get to
Yeah.
see that.
So
Yeah.
you bring all of your friends who are saying,
That's
we
right.
want it.
Yeah. Commissioner Castañeda did, from Department of Housing, did a good op-ed piece this morning. So, if you guys get a chance to read it in the Tribune, it's, you know, she dropped it this morning, so. Yeah. Awesome. And Lucha? Yeah, great org, great org.
Thank you all for being here. for
Really
taking
appreciate everyone's time. We're here to answer
Really
questions.
awesome.
We're here to be a resource. So even
Yep.
if we're gone today, you guys
You
have a
can
way to get a hold of
catch us.
us. Yeah, Mark knows all my email addresses, so. All our email
Exactly.
addresses, yes. So we're here as a resource. Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Appreciate it.